Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Charlie Bengel Jr., CEO of Remax Allegiance. Welcome to another edition of the Allegiance Way Show and the Daily Dose. My co-host, as usual, is coaching extraordinaire Amy Lassen. Amy, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Today, we are talking buyer process. It's been a good week of, short week, but a good week of shows. We're going to wrap up this week by talking buyer process today and tomorrow. And I'll tell you, this might be when I ask a client that I'm just getting to know or a realtor that I'm just getting to know, do you have a buyer presentation that you're proud of? That's the language that I use. I don't even use the word process.
Yeah.
95 out of 100 say no. 98 out of 100 say no.
Sure.
It's just not something that exists. And it's what I find is agents tend to wing it. Mm-hmm. Oh, I discuss that stuff when they're in the car between appointments, right? I discuss it when they have a question. And of course, with COVID, now more than ever, we need to have our people getting pre-approved. We do not want to be showing homes to people who are not able to buy those homes. And plus, it's incredibly unfair to be bringing people into a seller's home that are not pre-approved, I think. I just think it's just not right. And this is a perfect opportunity to kind of reset that kind of BS game that we've let ourselves play.
Yes.
Right. I get Zillow leads and other online leads where they just want to see the house. Mm-hmm. And then you have more of that discussion. But I'm not really focused on that. I'm focused on the buyer referral that you mentioned pre-approval to. Oh, yeah, I'll call them. But then you're still showing them a home 2 days later when they're not pre-approved.
Right.
So that's what I'm referring to, and other parts of the buyer process that I know that we're going to get into.
Yeah.
And we have what I'll call a buyer book, right? But what's not included in that is the market specific information that we need to be giving a client once you narrow it down to the town or the neighborhood. You know, what kind of a discount can you get? In other words, what's the list price to sales price ratio?
Yep.
Can you have contingencies or forget about it? Are you going to be competing? Talking about things like earnest money. How much is that in your market? I don't believe that that's in our buyer book. It differs market to market. And then getting into even questions like, I'm a millennial, I don't have a checkbook. How do I get you the money? Right. And that's a question that we don't think comes up, but it does. And when there's an agent who's not prepared for it, it's a problem. I have a client who, I think I've told this story on the show before when we've talked buyer process. She was showing $1 million condominiums in an urban area. I don't want to give away her location. And it was time.
I want to clarify for those who don't know that you're a coach. You're talking about a coaching client, not a real estate
I'm talking about a coaching client.
Coaching client. Yeah.
And she was showing these $1 million homes, or condos. They wanted to write an offer. They didn't have any earnest money. They did not have enough liquid money, right? They could get it, but they couldn't stroke a check that day.
Yeah.
And the agent was kicking herself, by saying, I thought they knew. I thought they remembered from when they bought from me years ago. And you and I like to say, there are some things that need to be gone over, whether they've bought before or not, whether they're a regular investor even, because when you're looking in different areas, perhaps you're used to, buying in certain neighborhoods, and then you're going a little bit off the reservation, if you will, and buying somewhere else. The market's different than that somewhere else. Right. And the requirements to get an offer through are somewhere else. And I think a perfect script when you meet somebody is, listen, I'd like to be able to help you understand how my clients are winning in this unusual market. That's the hook to get them into the presentation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you never set expectations, they end up getting disappointed later, right? When you're showing the $500,000 townhouse and you say, so what do you want to offer? And they say 420, and you want to kick them under the table. That's on you. That's not on them, right? When they really should be offering 515, right? So I think maybe that's my long winding kind of synopsis. But those are just some examples of the importance of this buyer presentation. And when you try to shortcut it, you will run into problems with people becoming annoyed because we all have expectations. And if we don't help reset the expectation that our clients have, you're going to run into friction because their expectations right now are not aligned with reality. We know that. I don't even know what their expectations are, but I can tell you that they're not aligned with reality. So where do you want to start based on all of that?
Well, I want to share that this is one of my favorite topics ever, which maybe makes me sound like a hypocrite because I get so excited about all of our topics. But I really do love, love, love focusing on buyer presentation. And I teach a 2-hour class called Buyer Presentation.
Right.
The next best thing you'll do for your career. So I really want you guys to take me seriously. And Charlie, I think you've done a really, really great job of giving the big picture and some of the points of pain. And I want to poke a pin in some limiting beliefs that maybe some of our listeners have about, well, they didn't have time.
Okay.
I asked if they wanted me to explain it. They said, no, thank you.
Right.
They've bought a house before. They didn't need it. All of those are really, really crap. I'm sorry. I will tell you, I do it every time. I adapt it if it's somebody who's recently bought a property from me or who is a really experienced investor. I won't treat them like a kindergartner, but I do not skip it. And I always go through current statistics and talk about the purchasing strategy, right? The negotiating strategy, adapting it to today's market. And I will tell you the number of people I'll ask, do you understand radon? And they all say yes.
Okay.
And say, let me explain it to you anyway, because I think I'm really good at explaining it.
Yeah.
And I do. Every single one goes, oh, like they just didn't want to look foolish or they thought they understood.
Yep.
So don't, go ahead and tell your broker or your coach. I asked them if they wanted me to explain it. They said, no, thank you. Don't ask.
Right.
Make it a part of your standard process. And here's the other thing. Take every buyer as seriously as you take every seller. They deserve to be educated about the process that they're stepping into. And this is how, Charlie, you said it, you're going to set expectations and avoid pain later.
Yeah.
And you're going to invite and encourage and inspire enthusiastic referrals.
Right, exactly. And just don't, anyway, I've already said, this is not something that you want to cut corners on.
No.
It's not something that you want to even give them the option of.
Yeah.
Because if you allow them to opt out of this buyer presentation, you are allowing yourself to opt in to problems later.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, right? Because when it comes time to write the offer, their reality is not going to be the true reality. And then you end up getting upset, annoyed, etc. That's not to say that I don't want everybody to think that this is like the silver bullet and that if you go through a buyer process, that people are not going to lose out on their first couple of homes. They all still need to typically learn their own lesson.
Sure.
But, if it's escalation clause time, then, that's something you could talk about in the buyer process, right? We're not talking discount here. We're talking, you want this house or these houses that we're going to be looking at. We know they're going to sell this weekend. You don't have a whole lot of time to decide. Your mom can't drive over from Pennsylvania and look at the house next week, right? Or it'll be gone. So setting all that expectation up front, I think, is just important. Do you want to share your outline and run from there? Okay.
Yeah. Alrighty. So, I just gave us a little bit of a map here to keep us on course. And I want to clarify, Charlie and I are talking about the entire buyer process, not just the buyer presentation itself.
Right.
And I had a coaching call this morning with a client who is having that problem of somebody calls on her listing. She tries to set the appointment. They're hard to chase down.
Yeah.
She doesn't know if they're pre-qualified. They don't get back to her, waste an afternoon. And I said, did you follow some sort of a questionnaire? She's a new client to my schedule. I said, did you follow a questionnaire? Did you interview them about how soon do you want to be moved? How long have you been looking? Do you have a house to sell? Are you committed to a lease? And I'm sorry if you guys can hear pounding. My neighbor is having their sewer dug up.
Boy, that's a bad day.
There's a lot of noise.
Cha-ching. I feel sorry for them. Boy, what an expensive repair. Anyway, go on.
So the thing of it is when they call, and those of us who say, no, I didn't want to put them off, or no, I didn't want to scare them away, that's practice and confidence. So believe me and Charlie that this will come with practice. Okay, confidence will come with practice. So initially start with some sort of a buyer intake form, some sort of a buyer questionnaire, some sort of a phone script, because that initial conversation, it may be face-to-face, but it's definitely before the presentation. So how long have you been looking? Where ideally would you like to be? How soon do you want to be moved? Maybe you'll have them say, oh, I don't know, we're just looking. And now you don't need to, cancel your daughter's.
I was going to say, this is a test for motivation.
Yeah.
Right. It's, the house that we're in now is being sold and we don't want to go through that again. So we're looking to buy. Or it could be like you said, oh, we're in mom's basement. We could be there for 5 years if we want.
Yep.
So it really comes down to, This and these questions before you meet with a buyer and the questions that you go over before you meet with the seller may be the most important questions of your career.
Yep.
Because it totally gives you a roadmap of where you're going to go there and the motivation and what you just said. How important are these clients based on their motivation, right? Hey, what's your plan B if we don't find you a house?
Right.
I'm good, or there is no plan B. We're finding a house,
Right.
right? Wouldn't that be good to know if it's mom's basement or, we have to buy?
Yeah.
I'd like to know that if I were a buyer's agent. So anyway, go on.
Well, and I don't want anyone to think that Charlie and I are being salesy or pushy or heavy closers. Like, I hope you heard my words. How long have you been looking?
Right.
How soon do you want to be moved? Is this neighborhood that you're specifically looking in? Those aren't pushy questions. Those are clarifying questions.
Right.
And I wrote a few points here on the outline. I want you to remember every single buyer that you show properties to, whether it's your listing, your open house, or you put them in your car theoretically and drive them around and show them other people's listings. They're getting access to those properties on your professional credentials, and I want you to take that seriously.
Right. Good point.
Don't let people bully you into, no, I don't feel like getting pre-qualified. I just want to see the house. Really, really take that seriously, and keep in mind that every seller has a reasonable expectation that you are bringing a motivated pre-qualified buyer.
But Amy, if I don't show them this weekend, they may call another realtor.
Okay, no, that's a real thing. And we all know the whole hurry up and meet them at the property and show them a house. But you have got to think about your own priorities, right? You have to look at what you tossed over your shoulder to run out the door to go meet and show a lead, because that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
A cold lead, right? Your former client, your sister-in-law, is not going to ask you to drop lunch and run without answering a basic question about motivation. So Charlie, I taught this class at my brokerage to a large room full of agents, and I told them that they absolutely need to start controlling their time. This is a career. It's not just a moment, right? You've got to start controlling your time, and running out the door to show houses to anybody who asks without pre-qualifying questions is one of the biggest time sucks there is in the business. And this woman who loves to argue with me, it's actually her thing. I think it's why she comes to my classes. She said, but Amy, this is the thing we wait for. The entire goal.
I've heard the story before. Yeah, go on.
Okay, of being awake and being licensed is to get that, will you show me this house call?
Right.
And so and for half a second, she had me kind of stymied. And I said, show of hands, how many of you, or maybe what percentage of the time, do you last minute show a property with no better guidance than they want to see it, that it closed? What percentage of the time? They were like way less than half.
Oh, yeah. Tiny percentage. I would say in the single digits, wouldn't you?
Right. Maybe 10% of the time. So 90% of the time, you're just winging a prayer in it. So I hope.
Yeah, and we're not firefighters waiting for the 911 call and there's a house on fire, so now I get to go do my job, right? As Davidson Lunger says, we're not 911 operators, and frankly, that's really not what we want. We want to have control over our time and schedule. Otherwise it becomes frustrating as we get further along in our career and we get busier.
Yes.
We hear that all the time from agents, right?
100%.
I'm too busy. I can't stand having to work nights. I don't see my family. It's typically because they're getting run ragged by buyers. It's not getting run ragged by sellers.
Yes, that's true. Well, now I know some Zillow babies, as I choose to call them, who really are accustomed to that. No. The most important thing is that you get in front of them, right? You got to pounce on the lead, speed to lead. You got to pounce on the lead. You got to meet them at the house. And I get that. And that's a technique, right?
Yep. Yes.
The thing that I want all of you to know is even those agents don't say, I don't need to know your name. I don't need to know which property. Let's rock and roll. They're asking the basic questions.
They have a script and a questionnaire. Absolutely. Yep.
And I think the standard Zillow answer is, I'd like to see the house at 123 Main Street. You affirm and you pivot. You say, of course, great property.
Right.
How long you been looking? You're looking it up. So you still follow a script. Even if you do, or get someone at your office to quickly show that property, you don't just do it blind. Absolutely not.
Agreed. Good.
So then buyer presentation itself, Charlie, I think you did a really good setup of saying why you don't make that an optional thing. You don't ask them if they're interested in that. You just make it a standard part of your service. All right. And my friend Elizabeth is so good at being really, really detailed with her buyer process. And she said to me, if they bought a house from me 3 years ago, I still do it. I just might modify it a little bit.
Right.
They may not need me to explain the details of how radon works and how successful mitigation is. But she says, I don't skip it. Hers is very, very long. And so this speaks to that they didn't have time. They didn't feel like it.
Yep.
Her process lasts an hour and a half.
Okay.
Mine is probably closer to 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you, I don't shortcut it. I walk them through everything. If we're there for a minute, we pull up the MLS and we go through that together as well in that same live time. And when I've had people say they didn't have time, seriously ask yourself, if they don't have 30 minutes to learn about what they're about to do, they don't have time to buy a house.
Well, yeah, and they're probably not going to be loyal, right? They're probably going to be looking with another agent as well. So a part of this discussion really is, what are we doing to get that exclusive relationship with that buyer?
Yep.
Right. And I like a VIP buyer program. You're not in love with them. If we have time tomorrow, we should probably cover them again. I think we talked about them last year. Mm-hmm. But the buyer intake questionnaire is already on the allegianceway.com. So it's already there. Do you want me to share the buyer book now, or?
I just want to read these 5 bullets and then you can share. So jumping into the buyer presentation, this is about education and expectation setting. All right. You have so many fewer problems when you set expectations right up front. I bumped into an agent in my office who loves to complain. Drama, it's just, you can predict it before you even see her coming that there's going to be drama in one of the transactions. And it's because she just creates rapport, jumps into the deep end of the pool, and then questions start arising. Mm-hmm. And there's so much panic for the seller or the buyer to get caught up on, wait, we didn't cover this. What about this? And it ends up being drama every time. And this time, she's telling me, oh my goodness, I was late because my buyer was freaking out. And I thought, I know, I'll just ask, what was wrong? She said, well, we're under contract, and he was asking me why we didn't ask for a home warranty, and is that an option? And he was really, really upset. And I thought, why is that not a page in your buyer presentation? Right. Oh, yeah, you don't use one. So just put out fires long before they start. So here are some basics. The buyer process includes showings, mortgage, inspection, closing. You mentioned earnest money. That has to be outlined as part of the process, right? And then I do have a page in mind about home warranty, letting them know this is an option. This is what it covers. This is what it costs. Mm-hmm. As competitive as our market is for buyers, you will probably not be able, and it wouldn't be wise to ask for one from the seller, but this would be the cost to you if you're interested. Right. No confusion, no whining and crying later. Yep. Current market statistics, and I say equals your buying strategy, right? Talk to them about establishing a really wise buying strategy. And it really does have to do with things Charlie said: list to sell ratio, days on market, average price, average availability in their target area. Environmental hazards, natural and man-made, agency relationships and documents with dates and deadlines. I actually have a page in mind that says contract deadlines are real, because I have had that happen when I go and I bullet them out. Right. I've gone to write the offer and I say, when would you like to close? And they say, we'll figure that out later. I'm like, no, we won't. Like, I don't know what makes them think we're penciling in dates and they're all negotiable. Right. Not really. Once this is signed, we're locked and loaded. And then I have an I will, you will page. Establishing responsibilities. And Charlie, I actually got this from coaching, because I found newer agents were putting themselves in the path of liability by assuming a lot of things were their responsibility that absolutely are not. Okay. You tell your buyer, I'm going to choose a plumber, I'm going to pay him, I'm going to invoice you. Wow, are you putting yourself in the line of fire if something goes sideways? So I have an I will, you will page in mind as well. So Charlie, you have a beautiful one to share as an example, correct? Oh. Yeah. So here it is. This is available to Allegiance Associates. Our marketing team will also do this for non-Allegiance Associates, as long as you're not in our markets, right? So if somebody is watching this in Minnesota, we're happy to do this for you as well. Okay. And it's fairly similar to the book that we have for listings. You'll see here, Ellen Ng, just like listings, this is her book. Mm-hmm. It talks about how RE/MAX is number one, how we're number one on the East Coast, and so on and so forth. Ellen's story, this is exactly what is in her listing book, by the way. Okay. And then testimonials, same thing. And then her unique services for buyers. So she chose to put these unique services into the book. Her unique services are going to be different than perhaps your unique services. So this page is customizable.
It talks about Remax Allegiance and who we are, the representation and the relationships, the entire process. And then, we start going through the process. And frankly, Amy, most of the rest of this book, I ripped off from you. So you and I have very similar presentations, right?
Yeah.
So getting pre-approved. I don't think we need to go through this whole thing, how to stay approved. We've all heard, don't buy a car, don't buy furniture, right? And we know that lenders right now, for those of you that are watching later, it's Thursday, May 28th. We're in week 9 or 10 of COVID, and lenders are very strict about verifying employment. They're doing it 2 and 3 different times because they don't want to give a loan out to somebody who's been furloughed or laid off. Well, there it is. Home warranties, right? We talk about what systems are covered and why you may want one and what the approximate cost is. And like you said, this really is part of the strategy. You're probably not going to get one from a seller in this market, right? Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you can't buy one.
Yeah.
And then the home search process. I will, you will. Interesting. You were just talking about that a second ago. Viewing homes. We talk about, what the limits are of that. We talk about for sale by owners, right? We need to be having these conversations. We want to be contacting for sale by owners on behalf of our clients. And same thing with new construction. Oh, lo and behold, on the next page, it's new construction, right? The last thing we want is one of our buyers to be waltzing into a model home, right? And then we get immediately cut out of the commission. That only happens when we've not had a conversation with buyers about how new home construction works, right? They wouldn't go there if they knew it would inhibit us from getting paid. Next page, if this would flip. There we go. What happens writing an offer? What will the client do? What will the agent do after your offer is accepted? There's almost a week-by-week calendar here. The home inspection. What's that include? What's that look like? What do we recommend? Inspections for different circumstances and what the approximate costs are. Title insurance, we get into all of that. Why it's so important. All of the costs. How does the realtor get paid? What do they have to pay for right away with the earnest money? What's the inspection look like? How's that paid for? The appraisal.
Yeah.
Who pays for what at closing? The seller usually pays, the buyer usually pays. This book is, based on what generally happens in the mid-Atlantic market. Access to property and then the walkthrough, and then tips for a successful closing. And then moving in, a little moving checklist 1 month before, 2 weeks before your move. And then there's a little wish list of what buyers are looking for. And that's the book.
That's great.
So it's pretty comprehensive. And, for our associates that are watching, it's $99, right? It's $99 for a semi-customizable book. I have some people that I coach in group, and they're like still working on their listing presentation in like month 4. And it's like, why don't you just use ours?
Sure.
If it gets you like 95% of the way there, what's the enemy of done? Perfect is the enemy of done, right? So if you're at 0 and you can get like 95% of the way there, I think that's a huge win. That doesn't mean that when things slow down, you want to tweak it and play around with it and have it more customizable. The marketing team can do that, but I don't know that I would do that now as things are opening up and you're really busy, right? Get the basics done. And if you want to tweak it between, Thanksgiving and New Year's, great.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be spending what little free time we have now starting this from scratch, because my listing book that I developed, I stole from our biggest competitors. It's amazing the amount of stuff that is online that people share that you can just, oh, I like that, I like that, I like that. And then that made my book. And then, the buyer book is basically yours. I think a lot of it came from your brain, but it probably came from competition, people that you've spoken to, experience, all went into that book. So those of you that are watching that don't have, a pre-listing book or a buyer book, just use ours. Get 95% of the way there, right? Instead of running around for months and still not having anything really done. Because I'll tell you, if you try to do this from scratch, it is a heavy lift. It took me weeks to get ours together because I was grabbing a bunch of information from our competitors, literally cutting it out, taping it onto pages, sending it to marketing, getting a draft, redoing it, and then those of you that do have presentations, somebody says here, you gave me great tips to add to my presentation, and that's great. So if you already have one, tweak it, add to it, whatever, and just remember that our marketing team is able to serve you at whatever level you want, whether it's the $99 semi-customizable all the way up to fully customizable, if that's what you really want. So that's the buyer presentation. Where do you want to go next? We've got like 4 minutes left.
Yeah, we're almost done here, but I don't want to gloss over, and we'll go quickly, but I don't want you to forget that there's more. All right. So we're talking about
we have all day tomorrow to continue our buyer process discussion. So you don't need to go quick.
Good point. Okay. So that is really, okay. Excellent point. So here's the thing. Take the initial interview absolutely seriously. Oh, and actually, Charlie, let me stop sharing because I queued it up so they can see what they could download. So, okay, there it is. So this is available on the Allegiance Way.
Awesome, good.
And so once you get good at this, I was talking to a coaching client this morning, and she said, "What if I'm in the car?" And I said, "Well, bring it with you, and or over time, you're going to get better at remembering to ask some of these things."
Yep.
All right.
Right.
And so no, if I'm driving and somebody calls about my listing, I don't have to ask how many bathrooms do you need. I don't necessarily need to be trying to take those notes while I'm driving.
Right.
But ask the basics. How long have they been looking? Is this the area they're particularly? What about this property attracted your attention? There are ways to create rapport and get into a quality conversation that will help really, really clear up how urgent their need is. And we could all be more efficient with our time. So as we look to tomorrow to wrapping this up, what I really want to emphasize to everyone is the entire buyer process includes expectation setting up front and assessing motivation, doing a really, really clear buyer process. And that means practicing, role play it with another person, practice it on your kids, on your pet. You will get better over time. Don't ask people if they're interested in having you do it. Just say, "This is my process." Oh, Charlie, I had a coaching client say, "Oh, I tried that once and they wouldn't look up. They just kept looking at their phone." I said, "Well, then you're terrible. So practice and get better."
They're terrible, or the client has some sort of strange, social impediment.
Sure, that too.
Yeah. But yeah, something's very wrong if they don't look up and look at you as you're talking to them. I mean, again, this isn't a 4-hour seminar, right? Yeah.
But I'm just saying, whatever excuses you guys come up with, know that Charlie and I will coach you to set those aside and do better. All right. Practice, 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 get better over time. Make this a really, really quality part of their experience. So tomorrow we're going to walk you through next steps. How do you keep them in the know as you go through? People say this is too long. It's too much information. They won't remember it. Correct. That's exactly right. You cannot expect in half an hour or an hour for the buyer to now be as educated in real estate as you are and to retain it all. So we're going to talk tomorrow about how to do follow-up steps. You're almost breaking your entire buyer presentation into those weekly explainer videos or the templated emails that you store in your Google folders that it's like, it's time for, here's the title commitment, here's the instructions for how to read your title commitment. As we talked about, here you go. This week is inspection. Don't forget, you're also having a radon test. That's a 48-hour test. Don't expect them to remember. So we're going to walk you through all those other steps and the extras that create that wow factor. And Charlie, I guess last script to drop on everybody, I would say in the beginning, when you meet with a buyer or seller, say to them, "I intend to earn a 5-star review with the quality of my service." Tell them that and then earn it. Yeah, set the expectation. We'll talk more tomorrow about when you actually ask for that review. It's not after the deal closes, frankly. I don't think it is, right? Because then they've already forgotten about you. So with that, this is a really good session. I knew today and tomorrow would be really helpful and on point. I hope that everybody watching it got some points and some good takeaways that they can implement in their business right away. And with that, see you back here at 1:30 Eastern tomorrow. Amy Lassen.